Hey there, I'm Danny Trester from Trester Tailor in Rochester, Minnesota. This is Tailor It Yourself. In this video, I'm going to show you how to lower the waistband on a pair of jeans or other casual style pants. This is going to help if you have a little bit of bagginess in the seat area of the pants to eliminate that and to fit a little closer to the body. To lower the waistband, you'll need a couple of things. You'll want thread to sew the waistband back on, a seam ripper or a razor blade to take the waistband and the belt loops off, a scissors to cut the excess off, and a ruler and tailor's chalk to measure and transfer our pin marks into chalk marks. Some larger items would be a sewing machine, an iron, and an ironing board to press it when we're done. If you're wondering how to fit this, you can check out our video on how to fit jeans. Just to give you a quick recap, you'll try the pants on, whether it's you or another person, and sort of pinch the center seam to the point where there's not as much bagginess in the back. You want to be careful you don't do it too much, because if you lower the waistband, when you try to sit, it might be uncomfortable or it might fall down too far, but just enough so that it brings out the bagginess in the back of the seat. So the first thing we'll want to do is take our pins out and transfer those into chalk marks so that we can have the garment laying flat. So if we look at the center seam here, if we measure that, it's about a half inch on the fold, so that's going to be a full inch. So when we remove that pin, we'll mark from the waistband down an inch. This mark will tell us where we're going to place our waistband when we sew it back on. So if we just go around the rest of the pants, so this mark was about 3/8 of an inch, which doubled would be 3/4 of an inch. So we'll remove that pin and then mark 3/4 of an inch from the bottom of the waistband. And then on the side here, we've just got a very small amount pinned. So it's a generous 1/8 of an inch. So I would say mark it 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch. And then on the other side, we'll do the same. There's a pin missing in this area, so we'll just duplicate what's on this side so that it's even. So we'll mark this about 3/4 of an inch from the waistband, and similar on this side. So we'll pin a little bit more. About 1/4 of an inch, but we'll make it the same as the other one. I had about 3/8 over here, so we'll do 3/8 on this side as well. So the next thing we'll want to do is prep our area and remove our belt loops and take the waistband off. For this one, we'll remove the belt loops from the bottom of the belt loop instead of the top. If you watched our video on how to take in the waist, we took the belt loops off the top. It's not going to shift anywhere because we're not taking that in. They're going to stay in the same spot. We're going to take it off the bottom because we're going to shift the waistband down. And again, you can use a seam ripper or a razor. I use a razor because it's faster for me, but if you're not practiced in it, it can be a little bit tricky. So if you want to be on the safe side, you can use a seam ripper. It just takes a little bit longer to pick those out. Now that we have those removed, you'll want to make sure you take all the stitching out, because it's a lot harder to take it out if you've sewn through it when you sew it back on. So it's always a good idea to clean up any threads before you start sewing. And we're not going to remove the 2 belt loops in the front. We don't need to do that because we're only shortening the waistband to about the sides, so it's not necessary to take the front ones off. All right, so now we will remove our waistband. So if you can kind of imagine this line of how we're going to taper this, about an inch here, 3/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch, and if you continue that line, you can kind of see where we're going to end up. So you can fill this in a little bit to help guide you using your tailor's chalk and sort of transition that line to the front of the pant. Something kind of like that. So we'll stop about there. And you can transfer this mark to the other side as well. And again, this tailor's chop comes off very easily once you steam it or put heat on it. If you could use a hair dryer as well, that'll do the trick. All right, so for our waistband, we're gonna remove that again. We've already worked on these because we took the waist in. So the chain stitching that's usually on the inside, kind of like what's on the top of the waistband here, isn't on this any longer. So this will take a little bit longer to remove and clean up because it's not chain stitched anymore. But you can use, again, a seam ripper to pick those stitches and pull this apart. Anytime you're using a razor blade to take something apart, I usually do it from the inside, that in case you do catch something and make a hole, it'll be on the inside of the garment, not on the outside. But denim's pretty tough, and this razor's pretty sharp, so it slides pretty easily. But if you're using a seam ripper, again, you could do that too. It just you could do a few stitches and pull, and that'll come apart. It just takes a little bit longer. And again, we'll want to remove our threads before we sew that back on. I recommend using this little thread grabber thing. It makes taking threads off really easy. It kind of grips it. All right, now that we've got that cleaned up, we will trim the excess that we've marked so that when we're putting that back into the waistband, it's not very bulky, especially here because there's a lot more than what would fit in that waistband. So if we look over here, there's probably about a 1/2 inch, maybe 5/8 of an inch, but you could go 3/4 of an inch if you want to leave a little extra. If you want to leave a little bit extra in case you get to the end and you try the pants on and they're a little bit too far, you can back that off. So sometimes it's good to leave a little bit of excess in there, but not so much that it's bulky. So you can take your scissors and just kind of eyeball. Just kind of trim that up. Okay, so now we've got our waistband removed, everything's cleaned up, we've got everything marked, and the excess has been cut off. So now we'll take that over to the sewing machine and put the waistband back on. When you get to your machine, you'll want to set up your thread. For this pair, it's got 2 color stitching on it, and the waistband on the bottom was sewn with a gray thread, so I'm going to put that on the machine first, but the the belt loops were sewn with a gold thread. We'll switch to gold thread when we do the belt loops. For your bobbin color, it's not so important to have that be an exact match because it's going to be on the inside of the pants and won't be visible. So it's really up to you what you want to put there. If you want to match it to the outside color, just use whatever you have on there. Either one's fine. For this one, I've used a light gray thread on the inside, just in case some of that pulls through the outside, you won't see the different color underneath. So first we'll want to turn the pants inside out, and that will help us lay it a little flatter as we sew it. For the stitch length, you want something that's a little bit on the longer side just because it'll more closely match what's already on the pants. But you don't want to do it so long, like a basting stitch, that it won't hold up and it'll pull apart if there's any pressure put on it. So I'm setting mine at about 3.5 to 4 millimeters so that it'll kind of match the rest of the stitching a little bit better. When you sew this back on, you don't want to start at one side and go all the way to the other in one pass. You want to start at the center and do half of it and then go back and do the other side. This makes sure that you don't get the bottom portion of the pants more on one side or the other. That'll keep it nice and even so you don't get to the end and all of a sudden you have to try to work all this fabric in. So it works a little bit nicer if you start at the center and do it in halves. So when we start this, We'll want to line up the center seam on our waistband, or if there's not a center seam, the center is marked by where the belt loop is, and line it up with the center of the bottom part of the pants. And then we'll put that under our machine. And we're lining up the waistband edge with where we've put our chalk marks. And then we're going to sink our needle and walk it over these first couple stitches, because sometimes they can be a little thick with all those seams there. And then we will go along and line up our chalk mark with the edge of the waistband. Sometimes the bottom of the waistband has a little more fabric in it than the waistband itself. This allows the waist to be a little bit smaller, but leaves room for the seat and the thighs. So sometimes you have to work in or ease in a little bit more of the bottom into the waistband. And to do that, you kind of use your left hand to push the bottom part in, and then use your right hand to pull the waistband taut. You don't want to do it so much that you end up with tucks or pleats, or it's not laying nice and flat under there, but you want to kind of have that differential so that you can work some extra fabric from the bottom in. And then we'll just go around and stitch this, making sure we stitch in the old stitch line where the waistband was, lining up where our chalk marks are at the edge of the waistband, and then making sure we pull the waistband tight so that we can ease in any excess that's in there. It's kind of a bit of a multitask, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty straightforward. Again, we're lining up our chalk marks with our waistband. We've gotten to our end point, so we just tack forward a little bit past that and then tack back, and that should secure that. And then you just want to clip any loose threads that are in there in the back of the waistband. So now that we've done half of it, we'll go to the other side and stitch the other half. And we'll sink our needle, line up our waistband with our chalk marks. And try to ease some of that fabric in there. And you can double check the easing. If you pull the waistband taut, you can kind of see how there's a little bit extra of this in there. The bottom is a little bit more bulky, so you can kind of gauge how much you're going to have to pull it. Sometimes it fits straight in there and you don't have to worry about it at all. And again, we're lining up our chalk marks. Sorry, I'm just picking some threads out. And now we've gotten back to our center seam, so I'm just going to walk the needle over that just so that I don't break it over that thickness. And then we'll just go in reverse a couple of stitches. And then we have the waistband back on. And it went on pretty smoothly. There's no bumps or tucks or pleats that we'd put in there. It's laying nice and smooth. And for the most part, it's lined up at the center, but it's okay if it's a little bit off because the belt loop will cover that. So now we'll put our belt loops back on, and we're going to place them in a little bit of a different area than where they were previously. You can see this is where the belt loop was, but because we've moved the waistband down, it's going to be a little bit below that. So you want to lay it, you don't want to pull it super tight because that's going to put tension on it. You want to leave a little room in there so you can stick a belt or whatever you're going to throw through there. But you don't want it like that, because then if you're wearing a shirt, it might, stick through the shirt. So you kind of just want to lay it nice with a little bit of ease in there, and then just stitch back and forth a few times. Remove your stitching. And now we'll go to the center one. We're kind of lining that up with the stitching on the other seam here. And then we'll do our last one. Let's move some stitching here. Move some old threads. So now everything's put back together and we'll take it over the ironing board and give it a final press. Now we can turn the pants right side out. And you want to place them on the edge of your board or whatever flat surface you're using. Let's give a nice flat press surface. And then you can just use the steam and the heat and the weight of the iron to flatten any stretched out parts. Get rid of any old remaining chalk marks. Just give it that nice final look that's nice and clean. For more information and courses, including downloadable PDFs, visit our website at tailoryourself.com. And always remember, measure twice, cut once. Thanks for watching.